I guess we have a nice small group today. Welcome to Developing Early Reading Skills at Home. My name is Sherry Rafalovich, and I'm a speech and language pathologist with the Toronto District School Board. I've been working on literacy interventions and professional development for teachers for a number of years. And we will get going since it seems there's only three of us, I think, or three of you rather. And one me makes four, will feel free to interrupt and unmute and ask questions as we go along, okay? So we're gonna talk quickly, or not too quickly, about developing early literacy skills at home for our K-2, K-3 students. There was a presentation yesterday by my colleague on older students. So overall, when we look at the reading research that's out there, we know that there are two distinct skill sets for developing reading. The first would be understanding of spoken language, and the second would be the accurate and fluent word reading that we generally call decoding. So I'm going to talk about both sets. I'm going to do a relatively quick job around oral language, which doesn't really give it its due. But I've presented at this conference before, and I find that in the early years, when you have younger children, our parents tend to be a little bit more interested in the decoding piece and looking for those kinds of strategies. So I'll go through the oral language piece quickly, and then we'll spend a little bit more time on some of the early developing decoding skills. Okay, so we'll talk about oral language, which includes vocabulary, sentence structure, conversation, narrative, story structure, pragmatics. And pragmatics are the rules that govern the way that we use language, whether I know to speak to a teacher in a different way than I might speak with my friends out on the playground is one example. And then verbal reasoning is also quite critical. So all of our reading comprehension actually is based in oral language and the development of oral language, which happens for typically developing children very early on in their lives. So how can we help with our children's understanding and using of oral language? Most typically developing children learn to talk by us talking to them, and they follow our models and they respond to us as we respond to them. So it's really quite at home conversational. So we talk to them, listening to them, and of course, reading to them is really quite critical. So not having them read to us is critical as well. But certainly by us reading to them early on is critical for developing vocabulary and complex sentence structure that we maybe don't use at home as typically as maybe gets used at school. If you do speak another language at home other than English, all of this early development should be done in the language that you feel most comfortable speaking. So if it is English, even though it's your second language, that's great. But if not, oral language skills transfer. So if your child speaks Cantonese as their first language, it provides a fantastic foundation for the development of English when they go to school. So there are a couple of differences between the kinds of language and that are used at home and school. And I don't mean English versus Tamil or English versus Urdu. At home, our children are familiar with the context, right? We tend to talk about familiar topics. Often, if you're like me, I have two children of my own and a husband. We tend to use directional language, right? So you need to get your backpack, you need to brush your teeth, you need to do this. And those tend to be short and direct types of sentences. Now, of course, we do talk to our children about lots of other things, but a lot of the language that we use at home on a sort of daily, fairly consistent basis is short and directional because it has to be, because we have to get our children and our husbands and everyone else out of the house or off to do something as we're also busy. So our language tends to be more conversational and context bound. When our little people go to school, what happens is they're put in an unfamiliar context, and when there's often unfamiliar topics that we may not have talked about at home, or they may not have the background knowledge for at home. And in a classroom in non-COVID times and also in COVID times virtually, there are lots of other children in the classroom, right? So the teacher has to deal with delivering multi-step directions because they need multiple things done at a time. There's also exposure to academic vocabulary and sentences in addition to that. So the bridge between home and school really are books. So reading to your child is one of the best ways to develop their early oral language skills. There's lots of research out there that shows that one of the best predictors of academic success are the number of hours a child is read to in their home language or in English or in any language that the parent is most comfortable or guardian is most comfortable speaking, is the number of hours they're read to. So the books that they're exposed to, also the number of books that are in the home has also recently been discovered to be a predictor of academic success and good oral language development. So books have far more complex language than we use daily. As adults, when we learn new vocabulary, we often do it from reading, not from conversation with colleagues and things like that, because we've developed our oral language expertise in whatever area we happen to either work in or be interested in. Books can teach us about unfamiliar contexts and topics. So just a few short tips about reading to your child. This is not an exhaustive list. So before reading at school, they're going to ask the students or the children to make a prediction. So what do you think might happen and how do you know that? To develop verbal reasoning skills, it's critical to ask our children to start to explain their thinking. So why do you think that this is going to happen in the book? What told you that? So maybe looking at the cover, maybe talking about the author. Maybe you've read that type of author or that type of book before. And then there's also the idea at school of making connections. So does this book remind you of something that we've done as a family or that we've seen at home? So before reading, it's nice to do a little bit of that. And then during reading, to stop and ask questions, right? So what do you think might happen next? You're asking your child to take information that they're learning or hearing from the book, and then putting that together to do some verbal reasoning about what logically might happen next. Always ask what do you or why do you think that, and get into some more complex type questions like that they can't sort of answer from the picture, right? Not just who, what, and where, but also how do you think the character is feeling and why do you think that? After reading, it's great to make some connections. Have you ever felt like that character? Why did they feel like that? And how do you know? The beauty of books is that they provide a shared context between you and your child. So they could act out the story or retell the story or make puppets. All of those will deepen the knowledge and the new vocabulary and sentence structure that they've been learning or that they've acquired from you reading to them. So one of the books that I use quite frequently, both at work and I used with my own children who are now a little bit too old for this, was The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So for an example, if your child hasn't read this book before, or you've read it 1,000 times, which is also fantastic to reread books with your children, they get something different each time from the book, and it allows them to deepen their oral language knowledge. You might ask, what is that on the cover? What do we know about caterpillars? Have we seen them before? What do you think is going to happen if we know it's called The Very Hungry Caterpillar? So just a quick summary on reading to your child. Listening and talking with your child will support their oral language development. It will lay foundations for them to develop reading comprehension strategies, and reading to your child will expose them to complex vocabulary, unfamiliar topics, and contexts. So that's, I've included a list and I will email out a PDF of the slides to you. So all of the links are live. They are also not an exhaustive list, but if you would like to, I've got some suggestions around listening to stories on StoryOnline.net. The actors read them and they're really quite interesting, and to watch that with your child would be great. The Toronto Public Library has a dial a story function, which actually allows you to choose the language that the story is read to your child in. There's quite a few languages on there. And then there's some ideas for multicultural books on Unite for Literacy. So I just included those. You'll get the link in the PowerPoint, the PDF handout. I also included a site for reading more about oral language development for your children, which is the Reading Rockets, one of the Reading Rocket pages. If you're familiar with that website, it's great. So do we have any questions about the oral language piece? Okay. Oh, I will email the PDF out. I have a list of your emails. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading the chats. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to get to the something else. Right now, we're going to talk about I'm going to talk, we're going to talk about the decoding piece now, accessing, accessing the actual text, right? If you do read with your children every day and, you know, they have lots of oral language development and your children are able to speak to you in full sentences, and they're also able to use lots of vocabulary and understand vocabulary, and understand stories that are read to them, and they're still struggling with acquiring reading or reading books on their own, the chances are that the difficulty or the explicit instruction that's required are most likely due to the decoding or the accessing of the print piece. So what we do know about reading is we need that basis of oral language understanding to understand language, but then applying that to print and translating it to print, you need this other set that we're going to talk about of skills right now that we're going to talk about, which leads to accurate and fluent word reading, or what we also is also often called decoding. So I hope that answers one of the questions in the chat. And then if you have more questions once we're through this piece, please stay on or type into the chat. It's very hard because I don't get to see everybody's faces, so we'll keep going. Please feel free to pop in without a mic and ask a question, or also the chat is fine. I have it open and it seems I can see it well. Okay, so basically, as a speech and language pathologist, when I'm asked to, in the schools, to see students who are struggling with reading and writing, I would do an assessment based on this profile that I have up right now. So this theory of reading that's been supported by research for about 30 years now. It's been a long time that this has been supported. And these two skill sets are the skill sets that I would look at as a speech and language pathologist. So first I would look at the student's oral language understanding. And if that is intact and well developed and reasonably well developed. I mean, we obviously, when they're young, it obviously keeps developing, and we look at developmental norms for that. But when but they're struggling with reading, then I would also look at this subset of skills that we're going to talk about right now: accurate and fluent word reading. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So there are 4 sort of categories or skill sets that are involved in a student or a child or all of us having become accurate and fluent word readers or decoders. So as adults, most of the words that we encounter, we don't have to figure out what they are if we're literate adults. But our children are decoding is actually the translation of speech sounds onto symbols, right? Print or letters. And what the research has told us for quite a number of years is that there are about 40 to 60% of our population of children who need explicit instruction in this development of accurate and fluent word reading. What often happens is that some students don't receive the explicit instruction that they need. And these are students that do not have learning disabilities, like a memory issue or a attention issue, or that may also affect their ability to decode words in print. So the first set of skills that we're going to talk about is phonological awareness. Okay, so phonological awareness really is the ability of adults and humans and children to parse apart or break apart oral language. There's no print involved in this set of skills, into words, syllables, and sounds. Okay, and this actually happens quite early for most children who do not have an atypical learning pattern. So for example, babies start to learn the difference or be able to show that they've heard a difference between the p sound, like in popcorn, and b sound. So if you watch my mouth when I say those two sounds, they're produced very similarly in our by our mouth. So p and b, right? Very, very similarly. The difference really is that your voice box is activated for a b and it is not for a p. But very early on, children, babies, 3 to 4 month old babies will turn their head to a speaker to show that they've switched attention, right? Between the two, when just those sounds are presented. So this is the oral language connection really between mapping sounds onto print. And many of our students who struggle to learn to read have difficulties in this area, sort of hearing the sounds, breaking up the words into sounds, which we're going to look at next. So phonological awareness is the big term, and phonemic, phoneme means sound. So phonemic awareness is actually the awareness of sounds in language. As these skills develop, they lay the foundation for children to be able to map the sounds of the language that they're hearing onto print. And this is for English language, but it accounts for many other languages as well. There are other languages that are not, that don't rely on the alphabetic principle. So it's a bit different, but actually the research is showing that those languages also, students are able to break their language down into at least syllables. Some languages are syllable based and some are sound based. So phonological awareness would be breaking sentences into words. So again, an orally delivered sentence, and I will show you an example. That's a bit easier skill than breaking words into syllables. So my first name is Sherry. So breaking my name into syllables, I would say Sherry. Also, blending syllables into words. So what we want our students and our children to be able to do is to break oral language apart, but also stick it back together. And you can sort of see how when we add print, that's what's going to build the foundation for blending and sounding out words, and blending them when we read and sounding them out when we write. It starts as an oral language skill though. Then there's also playing or manipulating with syllables in words. So I might say rainbow, say it again, but don't say bow. And so what my child would have to do is take that rainbow, break it apart, and just say rain. The next level or set sort of level of difficulty is breaking words into sounds. So what sounds do you hear in the word cat? Again, no print, it's all done just orally. K, a, t. I hear 3 sounds, k, a, t in cat. Blending sounds into words. So what word did these sounds make? A, p, a, p, mop. Very good. And then playing or manipulating with sounds in words. So say the word sat, say it again, but don't say s. So as I mentioned before, and you'll get all of this in the handout as well. The top part, the bigger the chunk of language that you're working with in a phonological game or activity, the bigger the meaningful chunk, the easier it is for our children to break and put back together. When you get into the sound or phoneme level, it becomes a little bit trickier and it's a little bit later developing. So earlier phonological awareness examples, if you were reading the Very Hungry Caterpillar book, you might say, we're going to read a book today. The title is The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Let's count the words. Ready? The Very Hungry Caterpillar. There are 4 words in my title. The Very Hungry Caterpillar. And you can use any sentences to do this little activity. And what this helps our students and our children, sorry, I say students more often than children because I'm used to presenting to teachers. Children, what it does for our children is it helps them understand that that stream of language that we hear is actually broken into meaningful word chunks. So it helps with word boundary awareness. And then in the middle of this book, if you're familiar, the caterpillar eats a whole bunch of different kinds of food. So there's a page in the middle of the book. So these little activities and these little games and tricks can be done while you're doing that reading piece that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So for example, there's chocolate cake there. So we could break that into syllables, chocolate, right? We could break the word cheese into how many syllables is cheese? Cheese. We could look at lollipop, right? And say lollipop, say it again, but don't say lolly, you end up with pop. And what you're doing is that you're priming your children's brains to break these meaningful units into smaller units that eventually we're going to map onto the print or the letters or the spelling patterns. So they're all fun little games. I like to play them when I'm driving. Say rainbow, say it again, but don't say bow, right? Say driveway, say it again, but don't say way. So those are the earlier developing ones with the bigger chunks of language. Now we're just going to take a look at the phonemic or sound level. So the skills of breaking apart or segmenting and blending, putting back together, occur both at the syllable level and also at the sound level. So in JK, we're sort of expecting our students to be able to do that kind of work at the syllable level. By the end of SK, we're expecting that they're able to break apart 3 sound words like cat and mop and man. And then as they get into grade 1 and 2, we're starting to expect them to be able to do sounds, single syllable words with 4 and 5 sounds. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So for example, what sounds do you hear in this picture? So this is a picture of a cat. So we have k, a, t, right? We want our little people to be able to go k, a, t, right? It's going to make it easier once we put the print on, and we are obviously going to add the print as well. It's just a separate set of skills, but you can do these activities with print and they become phonics-based skills. So that's an earlier one. And then we would also have, this is a bit of a tricky one that we present. So what about the word fox? What sounds do you hear in the word fox? Ready? F, a, k, s. I'll do that one again because it often causes a little bit of we as adults see the printed word often, right? And there's only 3 letters, but the letter X actually has 2 sounds that go together associated with it. So f, a, k, s, fox. There are actually 4 sounds in that word. So often when you have little people who are experimenting in kindergarten and grade 1, they may be writing this word as F-O-K-S, right? And I'm very happy when I see that, because what I know is that they've heard all of those sounds. So their phonemic awareness skills are quite good. What I have to do as an educator or a parent is say, okay, you're right. Those are all the sounds. But did you know that in the end of this word, there's an X, and the X makes a X sound. It's the only one in English that has 2 sounds associated with 1 letter pattern. And then the most difficult, or the highest level here, which is usually starts to emerge for our children in and around mid-grade 1 to beginning grade 2. So in that sort of time frame of development would be a word like plants, where we hear all of the sounds, and there's quite a few. So we have p, ul, a, n, t, s. So that's a long one. And you'll notice that I've left the vowels as red, right? Because it helps when we're going to start mapping our print on to know that every word has a vowel, and that vowels open your mouth when you say them. So these little boxes that you're seeing on my presentation are sound boxes. And if you are doing this with your children in a sort of sit down activity, it's great to just draw out the boxes, right? Or they can use Legos. Show me how many Legos you need for the word plants, right? And they can pull out the Legos or cereal or anything that you have at home that are small pieces, right? And I find most students or children really enjoy playing these games, right? So the reverse of telling me or segmenting the sounds in a word might be, I'm going to give you the sounds and I want you to tell me what word I'm saying. So for example, again, going back to our book, these are things that you can do orally without writing and without print, and your child doesn't have to read them in a book that they're familiar with. So I've stuck with the Very Hungry Caterpillar. So I might say, oh, look at this picture. Guess what word I'm going to tell you. Ready? Egg. What word did I say? Egg. G. Put the sounds together, blend them together. So the word would be egg, right? And there's a picture there to support as well. And if your child's oral language vocabulary is good, this should be a relatively easy task for them. And if it's not, then you can start using those little pieces or the sound boxes and have your little person push those pieces together. So there are two sounds in the word egg. Egg. Push them together. Egg. Egg. Okay, the other picture, there's something else in this picture. Guess my word for this one. So now we're going to ask them to blend again. Ready? E, f. What word did I say? E, f. Can you push them together? Leaf. And you can support as much as you need to get them to push it all the way together and blend that, all those sounds into words. So just a few ideas at home for phonological awareness. So at the syllable level, that sort of easier level, preschool to mid kindergarten, right? You can clap and tap the syllables in your family names. You can clap or tap the syllables of the items in your grocery cart, right? Oh, look, we need bananas. How many beats or syllables are in bananas? Bananas, right? Or, oh, I'm going to tell you my secret clue. Ready? We need to go and find some cereal. Oh my goodness, what do we need to find in the grocery store? Cereal. I mean, it doesn't have to just be the grocery store. It can be anywhere that you are at. Guess what I'm talking about in the kitchen. Ready? Oven, right? Any of those things done a few minutes a day is actually explicit instruction and phonological awareness. Sorting is a great thing to do. It's it's the beginning of problem solving ability. So if your child was helping you put the groceries away, you could sort the groceries by the number of syllables, or you could sort their toys into bins. How many have one syllable names? How many have two syllable names? How many have three syllable names? It's all getting your child to think about that oral language piece of literacy. So then when we move up into the sound or phonemic level, right, when we're talking about sounds orally with no print, the sound level, we're talking about single syllable words. Once you get into a word like watermelon, none of us, if we've never heard that word before, would sound out all of those sounds. So they should be single syllable words. So again, you can do some sorting by initial sound, which is a little bit easier than sorting by all of the sounds, like 3 sound words or 2 sound words. And you can play guess my word. What word is this? At. Oh, where is that in your room? At. Mat. What I wanted to point out too, just quickly with these pictures is, do all of these pictures actually would be sorted into the same pile, right? Even though sugar, if we think about it in print, starts with S, the first sound in sugar is actually sh, not s, right? So listening for these sounds and being able to isolate these sounds and blend these sounds back together is going to make it much easier for your child once we add the print, right? Because then they're going to be, we're asking them to map that auditory sound shh onto a digraph or a letter letter pattern that has 2 letters in it, even though it's only 1 sound. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So we have sugar, ship, shirt, and shark, right? They would all go in the same bucket if I was sorting or if I was collecting things that start with sh. Another great thing to do is to send your little people on a hunt in the house. Can you go find me 5 things that start with t, or 3 things that start with right? That's a really early developing skill in JK and beginning of SK, okay? So resources for phonological awareness. There are many games on the internet that are out there. I don't tend to endorse a specific one. I always find something a little bit off about all of them. But what I wanted you guys to have was a list of the look fors, right? So what would you be looking for if you got onto a free phonological or phonemic awareness game online? So you're looking for sorting by sounds with no print involved for this particular skill, right? You want the sounds to be produced clearly, right? So we don't want the sound to have an on the end. So for example, a lot of the online games and applications have someone saying the sound that's like this, suh, right? And buh and muh. That makes it really difficult to blend. So if I have suh, ah, tuh, I have sata if I'm trying to stick it together. We want really nice, clean sounds if possible. And then in addition, a Canadian accent. So there's a lot of British phonics games out there, and there's nothing wrong with the games. The difficulty is that the vowels are pronounced differently than we pronounce in Canada. So if your little person is struggling with hearing the difference between an a and an a and a u, or an I and an it's going to make it a little bit more difficult if it's not pronounced the way they're hearing it in a classroom. You want games to progress, move from 2 sounds to 3 sounds, up to 4 sounds and 5 sounds. And if you have time, and I know we're all really busy, it's great to play with your child so you can see what they're doing and maybe keep these look fors in the back of your head. And then I just added a little bit of research from the University of Oregon if you want to read more about phonological awareness. Does anybody have any questions around phonological awareness? Okay, so we're gonna, if you do, please type them in and I will address them at the end. So we're going to talk about sound letter knowledge. So now what happens with our children is that we need them to map those sounds that they're able to pull the words apart onto symbols, right? Which are letters. So in the English alphabet, we have 26 letters, like A. We have 44 sounds associated with those 26 letters. So for example, A has a short sound. So a long sound, a, and a schwa, which is an unstressed vowel. It's that right? So like in the word banana, the last a actually says and that's where that comes into play, is in multisyllabic words. Okay, so we have sat, the examples here are sat, make, and another. We don't say another, right? There are 250 different spelling patterns in English. So for example, the long A sound can be spelled AY, right, with a silent E. We also have the spelling pattern of EI, GH. We have EH, and we, as in hay, and we have AI as in rain, right? And it seems daunting and overwhelming, right, for many of us when we think about how critically we have to think about this. But many of us learn to read, probably all of us learn to read, and we don't necessarily explicitly think about all of these pieces. Some of our little people, again, that 40 to 60%, do need us to be explicit about this. Okay, whoops. Yes. Okay, so typically by the end of senior kindergarten, our little people learn about those single consonants sounds, right? So S says S, T says T, and usually the short vowels, A, and I. Many students, as I've said, need the explicit instruction around this. So not just being read to and not just listening to other people read or being exposed to pictures and with labels attached to them. They need us to sit down and say, look, this squiggle that looks like an S says S, like in the word sat. Not only do they need to learn the sounds and letter names, but they also need to know why they need this knowledge. So they need to apply it. So learning through songs is great, and they'll learn that S says S, right? But they need that applied to print so that they know why they need to know that and how they can use that knowledge or those sound letter associations to actually decode words. So later developing letters and sounds, as students are exposed to more text and more reading and more school, what happens is there becomes less one-to-one correspondence between sounds and letters. So for example, k, a, t, is a one-to-one correspondence, right? There's a C that says K, an A that says A, and a T that says T. Okay, so early, sort of, not early, but mid SK, they should be starting to sound these types of words out and be able to blend them and read them. What happens is, though, that the English language, as you saw on my previous slide, is fairly complex. So what happens is we do end up getting words like this. Oh, n. So phone is it's a fairly common word in our oral language, right? Although I guess we say cell phone more often. But in this case, you'll see that I've put the P and the H on one sound box because it's only one sound, but it's spelled with two letters. And this is the type of explicit discussion that you can have with your children as they encounter these types of words, right? The O is long because it has a silent E on the end. And this is another rule, right? One of the English language rules. So the E I've put in a different color because it's silent. It doesn't say anything. So I talk to my children and my students about how that E gives all of its power back to that O and makes the O a long vowel sound. So this is just an example of how it starts to become complex fairly quickly. This is an example slide of the English language word structure. So as unpredictable and as complex as we think, oh, sorry, there was a question. Wondering if you have some tips first. Yes, yes, we will talk about the U and the sight words. I'm getting there, I promise. Okay. So this is, you'll have this as well. So this is English language word structure. So so we have a few one sound words like I, right? Then we have open syllables, which are usually long vowels, like in the word go, he, okay? So they're long. And then we have short vowel words that have two sounds, short vowel words that have three sounds. So C stands for consonant and V stands for vowel. This is just to let you know or show you how English language gradually becomes more complex, right? So at the top, it's easier to read and spell those kinds of words. And then they become what we call orthographic, where there are spelling patterns and rules to follow. And these are the rules. So once we get past digraphs, is that PH, the F in phone has two letters that represent one sound. And our vowels tend to remain short, right? Like in dish or chop. Silent E makes a long vowel. Vowel teams are two vowels together. If you're as old as I am, you maybe learned as two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. Absolutely, makes it a longer vowel, but not all the time, right? So it's as these things come up when your child is reading to you that you can talk to them about, right? And I'm going to show you how to cue your children. So tips for at home for letters and sounds. For your little people, playing concentration or memory is a great way to work on sound letter associations, right? So you might have 5 or 6 letter tiles, or so it has to be pairs, so 6 letter tiles up. And I might say, as you flip it over, what you would like for them to do is say the name of the letter is M and the sound is So you're working on that concept piece. Now I'm going to turn up the next one. The name of the letter is S and the sound is S, right? And then those don't match. So I'm going to turn them back over. I'm going to try this one. The name of the letter is T and the sound is T. And I'm going to try this one. Oh, the name of the letter is M and the sound is right? And then that doesn't match. But I remembered that I had an M. The name of the letter is M and the sound is The name of the letter is M and the sound is And you can add the tiles. You can play with Scrabble tiles. You can make your own tiles. It's great to have your children make them themselves, or you make them together, so that they're practicing the writing piece as well. Just a quick note about vowels and consonants. So what I like to tell my little people is that vowels are sounds that open your mouth wide up, like ah, Consonant sounds have a point of contact and keep your mouth closed. And vowels are the basis for syllables. So if you put your hand under your chin and you say the word strawberry, The number of vowels corresponds to how often, or sorry, the number of times that your chin drops, right? Strawberry. And then all words in English have vowels, right? So this helps with their comprehension or their understanding of why they're learning all of these pieces, because it's going to help me read and it's going to help me spell. So thinking back to some of those activities about sorting, you can sort your letter tiles and sound tiles based on vowel or consonant sound. So if I turn over a is it a vowel or a consonant? Oh, my mouth is closed. You can use the letter and tile cards to play Make My Word. So give them a few letter tiles, make sure there's a couple of vowels in there and say, I want you to make the word map. Ready? You make it. And they can flip together those. And then to add a little bit of difficulty, you can say, okay, now I want you to make that word say maps. And they can add a s, right? And they can tell you what words to make. They can also make, and it's interesting because this is what someone was asking about, was LUV for love. So depending on when your little people are, how old they are, right? So this type of invented spelling with respect to LUV for love, if they're in kindergarten, that's great, right? Because what it's showing you is that they know that love has 3 sounds, l, v, and they know that the sound letter associations are L, U, and V, right? So, but that's not how we spell love in English. So what you can do is you can change up the letter tiles, and when you're trying to get them to think about it, you want them to sound it and say L, V, and then you want them to spell it. And you talk to them about LOVE, and the VE goes together, right? So if the word is in front of them for love and it's LOVE spelled correctly, what you would ask them to do is you would say, okay, look at this word. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to tell you what the sounds are, and you cover it up. It's L, V. And now I want you to look at the word, and I want you to say the letters that spell love. LOVE. Close your eyes. What do you see? LOVE. Love. What word is that? Love. Okay, look at it again, read it, and then write it. LOVE. So for those irregular or sight words that the teachers call sight words, that's one of the strategies that you can use. So the sounding of it helps them store that vocabulary, and then they have to see the print and spell it, right? Because the spelling doesn't correspond with the sounds one-to-one, like we were talking about. I hope that answers your question. We are going to look at sight words as well. So resources for sounds and letters, or phonics, right? There are lots of online phonics games. Again, I go back to just thinking about what they're doing and what they're saying, those games, right? So letter names and sounds are mentioned or talked about or connected in those games. Sounds are produced clearly, again, without that or the schwa on the end. The vowels are clear and in a Canadian type accent. The games move and progress from not just 2 letters and sounds to 3 and to 4. So your little people are moving up a hierarchy. And again, if you have time, I get it. I give my kids screen time so I can get other stuff done. I totally get it. But if you can take a look at it with them, that would be helpful. And then some ideas about support and some research can be found at that link. Okay, questions about the decoding or sound letter? Okay. Sorry, I'm just conscious of time. So a quick word about sight words. So these are these irregular, technically a sight word is a word that can be read fluently without having to apply a decoding strategy, right? So for you and I, and those of us that read, most words are sight words for us, right? We don't have to stop and sound things out unless we're reading something or chunk a big word into smaller units to read it, unless we're reading something new or something we don't have a lot of background or reading experience with. In classrooms, sight words are considered those little tiny words, right? So early sight word examples are mom, dad, I, me, you. Often your own child's name and their classmates' names are often become sight words for them as well. They can read them and write them and can't really necessarily break them down into sounds and letters. In school, sight words are a primary focus in the K-2 classrooms, and you often will see them on a word wall where the teacher has the alphabet up on a word wall, and they have all the little words that help in reading fluency, like in and on and the and my, up on the sight word wall. Some sight words have simple sound letter relationships that can actually be sounded out, like in and on and up. They're one-to-one correspondence. They're fairly simple, and there's nothing wrong with your your children sounding those out to figure them out if they do not know them automatically. And in kindergarten, they may not know them automatically. It depends on how often they've seen them and how often they've practiced them, excuse me. Other sight words don't, right? There's words like the. That's a pretty famous one. It occurs a lot in print. So it's one that we need our little people to recognize, and they can't sound it out, particularly in kindergarten, because what they would probably have as background knowledge for phonics would be t, h, right? Rather, whoops, sorry. And the down has a vowel team in it, right? So what you can do as a parent when you're reading with your child, like I was saying before, if the word the comes up and they don't know it, you could say, here's the sounds in that word. Okay, let's look at the word. Okay, so it's T-H-E. The sounds are the. The letters are T-H-E. What's the word? The. Okay, and the more that they practice and the more that they read, the more that they're going to be able to do this. But that's the kind of cueing that you can use as a parent. Same with down. Here's the sounds. Have your finger under the word. Ready? D, ow, n. What word is that? Down. All right. Oh, that's a great tip, actually. Thank you. So don't use language sound games adapted from other languages for English. They do not reflect the specifics of English, yet alone Canadian English, and could only confuse your child. Yeah, with the birth of the internet, there's lots of things out there. That's why I suggest, if you're giving your children access or having them play educational games, that you listen to it with a critical ear and just hear what they're doing and what they're saying. Thank you for the tip, Gergana. I hope I said that right, Gergana or Gergana, thank you. Okay, so tips and resources for sight words at home. The top link gives you the complete list of Dolch words, which are considered sight words by the educational system, and they're graded, right? So there's like pre-primer Dolch words, grade 1, or kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. It sort of ends at grade 3. And these are the words that have been found to occur most frequently in early readers. So they're words that are expected to be fairly easily recognized by your little person. So tips to play at home: you can make memory concentration. I know I keep going back to that. The kids really seem to like to play it. And if you have a small set, it's pretty easy. And if they've written the words on the cue cards or whatever you're using for your tiles, it's really helpful for them to have written it and then read it and recognized it. A lot of what our little people who are struggling need is repetition and the phonological and phonemic piece attached to the print, right? So if they flip over the word the and you say, here's the sound, th, what letters do you see? T-H-E. Here's the sounds, th, the. What's the word? The. It's about repetition for many of our children who need the explicit instruction. So that's the example that I gave. And then I gave you the Reading Rocket site, if you want to read a bit more about sight words, and there's always some great suggestions for work at home. Oh, that's my the. Okay, decoding strategies. How are we doing for time? Okay, so decoding strategies really are all of those skills that we've just talked about when you're attacking print put together, so that when your child comes across a word in a book that they've either brought home from school or you're reading with them at home, what strategy are they using? Okay, so what we want them to be able to do is we want them to look at all of the letters in the word, right? They can't just look at the first letter. They have to look at all of them. Keep their eyes on the word and not look at the pictures. We need to be focused on them looking at the word, right? They may not know what's in the picture, right? That's meanings based, and we want them to understand what they're reading. But if they can't attack that word, then they will not be able to read to learn later on, right? Because they're going to learn new vocabulary from print. We also want them to have their finger on the word, not the whole sentence, on the word, and move it along underneath in a little scoop. And we want them to sound out the word using what sounds they know. And as parents, if they do not know all of the sounds, or it's one of those irregular ones, you're not going to read the word for them. You're going to give them the sound they do not know. Oh, you know that it's D for D. The OW I'm going to tell you says ow. And the last letter is an N for down. Okay. And we want them to blend. They can't just sound it out. So if your little person sees cat and they go k-a-t, k-a-t, they have to put it together. So you have to say, we have to blend it and put it together to read the word. Just sounding out alone is not decoding and not reading. There are different kinds of books out there. So in the classroom or at home, when you read The Very Hungry Caterpillar to your child, or whatever book you choose to read, those are called authentic or trade books. And they have lots of rich, different varied word structure in them, different sentence structure, lots of great vocabulary. Leveled texts are the texts that they tend to use in small guided reading groups at school, and they are leveled not based on decodability, but based on how complex the vocabulary meaning is, how complex the sentence structure is, and how complex or what level the Dolch list or sight words are. In addition, there are decodable books out there. And these are books that follow the complexity of word structure that I showed you earlier, right? So in their organization, so they would move up gradually, and they would have 3 sound words with short vowels in a set of books. And then they would move up to short vowel words that have 4 or 5 sounds in them. And they would move up from there then into silent E. So there's 3 different sorts of types of books out there. So just if you are reading with your child and they get stuck, I just put this slide together. And what you can do is, for the first one, so we would read this, we know the sentence. And then for the sight words, again, I think I've said this a couple of times. I would say, if my child did not know that first word, I would say, okay, ready? I'm going to tell you the sounds. Okay, and now I want us to put them together to read the. Okay, you've got the word the. What are the letters? T-H-E. What's the word? The. Great, you got that word, the. If you have a decodable word where there's sort of one-to-one correspondence between the letters and sounds, I would ask my little person to sound that out if they did not know it right away. So I'm going to ask them to have their finger under there. I've used a little bar, and go d, a, g. You give them the sound if they do not know the sound, but don't read the word for them, right? We want them to try and blend it and put it all together. So, and then we're going to go back and reread it and go dog, right? So I have dog, dog. If they can't blend 3 sounds and they need you to go, okay, I hear dog, make it shorter, dog, and have them say it fast. Gradually that should reduce for you so that they are starting to blend it themselves. For the bigger words that you might see in a leveled text, like jumped, right? You're going to ask your child the sounds that they know. So, and you're going to help them with the ones that they don't. So the ED, so we have j, p, and the ED doesn't say ed in this case. It says d, right? So you're going to help them with that if they don't know it. And then you're going to help them blend it. J, p, d, right? J, p, d. Can you put it together for me and say it fast? Jumped, right? For spelling patterns like the ER and the ED, you can tell them what it is, right? And talk to them about it. So the ER, so we have O in this word, it says O, v, and then the ER always says together. So you can talk to them about the spelling patterns that go together. So O, v, ov, if we have to go back to syllables. There we have our the again. Hopefully they will remember it. If they don't, you're going to cue them again. And then for fence, here we have a soft C, which is followed by an E. Those last 2 letters say S, and that's what you can tell your little people. And that last one doesn't say K because there's an E after it. It says S. Okay. And remember, we always go back to blending. And then once they figured it out, what I tell my little people is it might take you a while to get through this sentence, and that's okay, right? You figured out all the words. We got them all together. It's all accurate. You figured it out. You decoded it. Now we're going to go back and reread the sentence for fluency. So we're going to, or smoothness, right? So we're going to say the dog jumped over the fence, and they're going to scoop under 2 words at a time. So tips for reading with your child. So they're going to help you read. You're going to read together at whatever level that they're at. Choose books that your child wants to read. You're going to have a lot less fighting if they're interested in what you're reading. There are always words in authentic text, like The Very Hungry Caterpillar, that your child can help you read, right? What we want to instill in our children as well is a love of reading, right? And we want them to be excited to read. And so you know your child better than any of us at school. So you'll know and you'll figure out what they're willing to do without getting frustrated. So maybe you're sounding the words out for them, right? Maybe they're telling you what the first sound is that they know. They know that the P says P. Great, you've started it. Now mommy's going to, or daddy's going to help you with the rest. Ready? And we're going to blend them together. P, p, pup. Look at that. You read the book, right? Or you read the word rather. Gradually increase the time or pages or number of words that your child reads with you, and talk about the books and do the oral language piece as well. We need to also have the comprehension. So you read the word pup. What's a pup? Do you know do we have a pup at our house? Right? Those kinds of things. Oh, this didn't. So I know a common concern at this age. Sorry, I'm just going to finish this and then I'll answer that question. So the BD confusion. So I know that, and it's very common and very typical between sort of JK all the way up to about grade 2. Often there's this BD confusion. I'm sure many of you have seen it. So one of the cues I just wanted to add in here, because I usually get the question around this, is get your mouth ready to say the B or the D. Let's do B first. So B, what does it look like? Don't say it. So I have a line, right? My mouth is a line. So the line comes first. And then the circle for a B. Or when you're reading, what do you see first? You see the line first. Make your mouth. What sound are you going to say? B. You can't say duh with your mouth closed, right? So opposite for the D, right? Get your mouth ready to say D, the duh sound. Don't say it. Look at your mouth. It's a circle. Circle first and then the line. Same in the reverse for reading, right? So if I see this, look, you have to make your mouth into a circle first. Can you say buh with your mouth like this? You can't. So just a little bit of an artic speech pathy cue for helping with BD confusion. Okay, resources for decoding strategies. So Starfall has some decodable books on it. And then there's this fantastic website out of the States that right now online is free for students to access decodable books. So books that work up the structure or hierarchy of word structure. So it's Flyleaf Publishing, and I will email out the PDF for you. And then reading more about decoding strategies is there as well. This is my email. I'm happy to answer questions. I also encourage you to talk to your own school speech pathologist if your children are already in school, or psychologist. We have lots of strategies around decoding and sound letter associations and the sort of, okay, I'm going to answer the questions now. So for fence, do you say the E is silent, or do you treat EN as a unit and just tell them that the sound if they don't know? Okay, so fence, to sound out fence, right? The E is silent, but any C that is followed by an E makes a S sound. So when you're early on so that's how I would explain it. So fence would have n, that you can hear the n when you say fence, and then the s on the end is spelled CE. I hope that answers that. Any tips for a grade 2 student that always leaves vowels out when writing? She keeps writing with only consonants. Yes, so we need to talk about, it's the phonemic awareness piece there, right? Where we want them, when we talk about how vowels open your mouth. So if I spell dog, DG, right? I want you to read it back to me. D-g, d-g, d-g. Do you know those two sounds? My mouth didn't open. What am I missing? So it's almost a metacognitive strategy. Sorry. So you have to get them to sound it out first. So if they're going to spell the word dog, grade 2, she might be spelling something more complicated. But if it's dog and it's a single syllable word, we're going to sound it first. Before we put our pens down, and we're going to go d, g. Which one opened my mouth? D, g. I have 3 sounds there, so I have to have at least 3 letters. You can also do it with letter tiles, right? And you can also do it by pulling down the tiles or the letter tiles or the sound boxes, and get her to read her work back, or his work back. Oh, she said she. So read it back. If I've written dog as DG, how can I read that? DG, DG. I can't read it because my mouth doesn't open because there's no vowels. I hope that helps for the grade 2 that leaves vowels out. Sorry, I should specify. Okay, great. Sorry, I should specify it's the E in the EN unit that is silent. No, in fence, we're back to fence. So fence, if I sound out fence, is f, sorry, not f, n, s, and the s is spelled with a C and a silent E. So that would be on one sound box, fence. I hope that helps. Yes, I'm going to share the slides. I'm going to email them out. I've been told that I have access to your emails from registering, so I will email out the PDF that has all of the live links in it. Anyone else for questions? We're 2 minutes over.
Hi, I do. I have a quick question. My son is in French immersion. Now, with English and French, they're a little bit different.
They are.
Would it confuse him?
Okay, so French is, however, sorry, I'm just going to turn you up a little bit. French is a similar language to English in that it's alphabetic, right? Yep. The difference for French comes in vowels, and actually French is a little bit more transparent than English, right? So what I can tell you about the research is that if you do phonemic awareness tasks, so no print, sounding out French words, right? That will transfer in French and to English. So if I can do 3 sound words in English, I should be able to do 3 sound words in French. The difficulty, or the difference, it's not a difficulty, lies in the spelling, right? The orthography. Right. It's a little bit different. My suggestion is always, you can still talk about vowels opening your mouth, right? It depends on your how comfortable you are with French or English, or whichever your better language, right? But French, you can also look up their word structure. They have a similar type of hierarchy, right, that we have in English. So the theory and the metacognitive piece behind this and the decoding strategies are not confusing. What you have to just be careful of is making sure that you discriminate for him or her between the vowels, because that's where they're different, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay, I see.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Sorry, I hope that was helpful.
Yes.
It's very hard to monitor and talk at the same time. Okay, I see. So the first E fence makes a sound. Yes, it does, Chelsea. I thought it was silent. It's even hard. Yes, it is tricky, right? Especially, it is hard for us to hear as adults, because we don't do this anymore because we're readers, right? We don't stop and think about it. But if your little person is struggling, we need to slow down and think about it ourselves as well, right? Like we would read the word fence and not think twice about it, right? But if we stop and you just look at it, and you can do the sounds with the print for yourself, and then you just have to say, not just have to, it's not easy. And I completely understand, and this is only an hour presentation, and this is really complex. But if you can break it up for them and help them get the sounds, the spelling patterns will come, and you will figure it out together. And the other beauty of is Google. Google is amazing, right? You can always Google why is fence spelled with a C. You can, and you will get an explanation. Would it be possible to get, yes, Cindy Price, I will write your email down. Yes. Another question. I always ask my child questions about what, oh, if they don't remember. Sure. So it says, I hope it's okay if I read it out loud. Another question, I always ask my child questions about what she is reading to see if she understands content, but she keeps saying, I don't know, or I don't remember. So, some strategies for that. Hopefully there's still some picture books and things like that. So pictures in the books that she's reading. So hopefully you can go back and ask her or him what's happening on those pages, right? So go back and do, that's an oral language piece, right? Now for some of our little people, they get anxious and reading the words is really hard for them. So they sometimes lose the meaning, right? Because they are working really hard to get those words and figure out what they are. So you can always go back and reread it, right? To her or him, and then ask some questions. And then you can also go back and have them look at the pictures, because this is the oral language piece, right? So we want them to understand what the story is about as well. I hope that helps a little bit. Sometimes I say fence and they write fans. How can I solve this problem? So someone has said that when they say fence, their child writes fans. So what that's telling you is that they're having difficulty splitting up and discriminating those sounds, right? So what we would really like them to, what you're going to have to do is do some of that phonemic stuff that we talked about. So f, n, s. Okay, what sounds did you hear in the word fence? F, n, s. I didn't say f, n, s. That could be vowel discrimination as well. They're having difficulty hearing the difference between an and an embedded in words. It's tricky. It really is. So breaking it up for them and helping them spell it, and showing them and scaffolding the f, look at my mouth, that's an E, n, s. The spelling piece, you have to talk about the C and the E, and then fans, get them to write both and get them to read back their spelling. They need to read it back to you. That's really critical. I hope that helps a little. Are there any online games or apps that we can use to practice sounding out the vowel consonant or vowel combinations like E, A, or N? There are apps out there. I'm always really hesitant, to be honest with you, just because of the way that some of the vowel teams are pronounced. But there are some, the Measured Mom is one that often has like activities, but they're printable. And I'm not really endorsing her either. It is hard to hear those for sure. I'm sorry, I'm not great at online. I'm not a huge fan. Okay. I would, so for the online stuff, have a look at it, right? The higher up, like EA, is a vowel team. And often what happens that's a higher, a later developing skill. And often the online phonics stuff is really only like that early sort of kindergarten level. It's really hard to find. So I'm sorry, Chelsea, I don't have a better answer than that. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you for coming out on a Sunday. I hope the rest of the presentations and the rest of the conference is great.